As I mentioned, finding that energy is really, really crucial no matter what time of day you're on. Typically, it's early morning stuff. You don't see a lot of nighttime unless it's late night with somebody, but it's usually early morning, weekend stuff. And low energy is really enhanced on television. If I'm doing a demonstration, I'm just speaking as I normally would to you, having a conversation, it really is going to come off low energy. And I'm not saying you have to create a caricature and be somebody you're not, but you do have to, like I said, this guy yesterday doing 48 in a row, you do have to have that energy. You've got to find, whether it's your personality, whether it's 15 cups of espresso and jumping jacks beforehand, a shot of mezcal, but you've got to be present and you've got to be in the moment and you've got to be ready to engage with that host or with the camera. I find that just doing a ritual, whatever it is, I'm not a morning person, but whether it's exercise or a good breakfast or something, but just so that you're up and 110% ready to go and present, not kind of groggy. One example, when I had Emerald on my show years ago when he was on a book tour, he had been out late the night before, had come in the morning to tape a segment with us, and you could tell he was groggy and he was having his coffee, but as soon as we did the 3, 2, 1 and started rolling and I welcomed him to the segment, he was completely there and present. Steve, it's great to be here. I'm so excited. I'm going to talk about how to make the best bread pudding I've ever had, and it's one thing we serve at all of our restaurants in New Orleans. And he was completely engaged and making eye contact with me, and he clearly knew how to find that energy, that reservoir. Be descriptive. Rather than say everything is wonderful or great or delicious, you end up sounding like a used car salesman. And you've got to remember, people at home don't have the benefit of the smells and the tastes and the textures here, so you've got to be that translator for them. So one example I had here was this cheesecake. It's really moist. It's got just a touch of amaretto, and it sits on a really crumbly bed of Oreo cookies. Any kind of food has got something to describe. This beautiful layer of sweetened caramelized onions that I put on this sort of thick, toasted French sourdough bread, and I'm going to just slather a little bit of French mustard on it to give it a little bit of tang and punch. And then I just like to put a little bit of cave-aged Gruyere on it. It gives it a little bit of saltiness. And when you put it in that panini press and it melts and it oozes outside of the bread, I mean, I'm just describing it. I'm not really saying it's great or it's wonderful or it's delicious, but hopefully the way you're describing it will convince people that it is delicious. You want to get their taste buds going. So food writing is a great way to learn this. Read Savour, read Gourmet, read Food and Wine. Great food writing is always very descriptive. It takes you to a place. So that is something you can employ into your on-air work. Ask questions ahead of time. A lot of times chefs show up and they get mad at their publicist or they get mad at somebody and they say, they didn't tell me that I wasn't going to have a burner. They didn't tell me that I didn't have any outlets for plug-ins. I assumed they had all this stuff. And that's not their job. The chef's job, the person's job, is to ask questions ahead of time of the segment producer. Typically, there's a show producer that handles the whole program, and then there's a segment producer that just handles your 3, 4, 5-minute segment. And they're your conduit. And rather than defer to your spouse or your publicist or your marketing person and letting them work out the details, if you're the person who's going to be going on camera, you need to be 100% sure of what you're supposed to do. So if I were coming to the Drome today, I'd find out, okay, I want to make sure that I've got a burner that works. Oh, you don't have one? Oh, I'll bring my own. Okay. Do you have pans there? No? Okay, great. I'll bring a couple of my own pans. Bringing tasting spoons, forks, napkins, towels, whatever you're going to need to do to get the recipe done. Typically, you bring 95% of it unless you're on the Today Show or a national show. But in local television, you've got to bring everything yourself, and even a tablecloth, which would be crucial.